Well, since the Avengers of it all, Tony's a little bit traumatized, and I asked that he should be. I mean, wormhole opened up, there's aliens and all that stuff, and I thought, well, rather than just pretending that didn't happen, let's bring it into the latest installment. If the first movie was just about getting people to know who Tony was and getting his origins straight, and the second movie was kind of about the legacy and his dad and the family he came from, Avengers obviously was about teamwork and this very kind of big endeavor for Disney and Marvel. And now Iron Man 3 is kind of a return to Tony's ongoing internal journey and how that relates to this most formidable opponent he has in the Mandarin. Well, what we figured was, in addition to being just a little freaked out by what happened in New York in Avengers, I thought, well, what would he do next? He would probably start tweaking on building as many weapons in the form of suits as possible. So we wanted to keep each one a different personality. His Mark 42, his kind of work in progress, is autonomous. It's prehensile. He can call it to him, and he has little repeaters under his skin that are kind of give it directions of where to attach. Many of the other suits are kind of more they're more task specific, and we used to have some really funny names for them, like Mary Kate and Ashley, and all kinds of fun stuff. Well, you never forget your first time. I like the fans who like the original Mark One because that's the one he builds to save his life. It's also the one he's in when he says goodbye to Yinsen. It's the one that he builds out of desperation. But I have to say there are some suits in Iron Man 3, and I'll leave it to the audiences to pick their favorites, that they're pretty awesome. Well, if I was Tony, I would say the thing I enjoyed most is that I am the center of attention again. Um, I was actually very good for my humility to realize that I was just part of a bigger thing in the Avengers, and it worked splendidly. And I really believe in my co-stars, and I love all the characters. But I guess the opportunity now was to capitalize on the success of Avengers and maybe do something that we might not have been afforded the opportunity to do if Joss hadn't done such a great job. Well, deception is useful, and what we've always enjoyed. In the first Iron Man, things wind up being easy to follow, but they also tend to change. And I think an elusive bad guy who's also kind of wearing a mask is a very cool idea. It was also probably the biggest risk we took in Iron Man 3, and Sir Ben, playing the Mandarin, probably has just one of the best arcs in the history of these films. Well, Tony's relationship with Pepper is John Favreau, obviously our original gangster, said that that's what the whole movie's about. As much as it's his heart, his chess piece that makes him different than a human being, it's Pepper that makes Tony different than the kind of jerk billionaire arms manufacturer he used to be. So their relationship has gone to another level. She's moved in, and of course now they're having all the challenges that you have when you're living with somebody and you're in a committed relationship.
Like giant rabbits.
Yes, Shane has a very interesting sense of humor, and I think the giant rabbit has to do with everything that the guy in a relationship does that makes no sense to the woman. It's like, if you want to know what I wanted, why didn't you ask me? Because your idea of what I want is incredibly ridiculous.
I think the relationship between Tony and Pepper evolves a lot over the course of the four movies if you count the Avengers. Um, in the first movie, she's very much his girl Friday, his assistant, cleaning up his messes. And by the time we get to the third Iron Man, they're living together. They're in a very equal position. She's now the CEO of Stark Enterprises. She's a very she's really stepped into her power, both professionally and in the relationship with Tony. I think Pepper in this movie is, stronger. She's found her voice more. She's still very sweet and soft at her core, but I think she's also, a little bit tougher in this movie. I have to say, doing the action sequences in this movie were my favorite part of doing it, really. Just because it was so novel for me. I've never done stunts before. I must have done something at some point, but not like this, not sort of harnessed in and strapped up and flying in the air. And I really loved it. It was a real high point in the shooting. Well, in Iron Man 2, I had Scarlett Johansson around, so that was really nice. In this movie, there were the Maya Hansen character and also the bad, I don't know what her character's name is, I forget. But, so it was nice to have, it's always nice to have women around, and it's always been such a kind of a man's club, the Marvel world, that it's nice to have women there to play with. I think what I've enjoyed most about Pepper's evolution is, just seeing her really grow into herself and, realize her power and her strength. It's been a really fun arc to play. I think fans of Pepper will like this movie the best, by far, because Pepper really gets to do things that she hasn't gotten to do before, and also for the women fans, just in general, there's a lot here with Pepper and the love story between her and Tony to really enjoy. I think that Pepper, well, certainly in the Iron Man movies, she really has, the relationship is really at the heart of the films, and I think that that's why. One of the reasons that they work on such a big scale. It's great to have special effects and all of that, but I think you really care about these people and their relationship, and you've seen it also grow from a kind of sexual tension to a full-blown, really developed, deeper relationship, and it's a nice thing, it keeps bringing the movies back to a real and emotional place. The thing that I enjoyed most about working on Iron Man 3 was really having my family there while Robert's family was there. It just felt, it feels like going home in a way when we all get back together, and I really enjoyed the dialogue. I thought the script, this was, I think, the best script that we've had. So it was terrific to get to, kind of start with something so finished, because the other two movies, it was last minute, and they were, Robert was changing everything on the day, and so this was a little bit more, it felt more finished when we started, which was good. It made the job a bit easier. I think Shane is a really intelligent, witty, he's got a great facility with language. Obviously, he's an incredible writer, and he's got style, he's got a visual style, and I think, I missed John a lot, and it was weird that he wasn't directing it, but it was nice to have, somebody who was really engaged in the process and excited about being there, and, it was kind of, it refreshed everything.
The Mandarin, his main weapon is not fists or kicking or biting or slashing. It's not, his violence is not physical. His Mandarin's version of violence is to verbally attack Western icons that the Western civilization quite rightly hold dear. And he attacks them through a mental process of language and manipulation. He uses the kind of rhythms of speech that I've seen others use many years ago. There's nothing new. Repetitive speech, rhythmic speech, and use of a kind of righteousness in the voice, that gives him a very disconcerting but total belief in the utter political garbage that he talks, but he relays it with such earnestness and gravity that it's really disconcerting, especially as he has an American voice. I think that my influences coming into making the Mandarin character would probably be historical, and also there are elements in his political broadcasts of Shakespeare, of that solemn religious. Sorry, I don't mean religious in the religious sense. I mean the manipulation of those preaching rhythms, if you like, preaching, teaching. And those approaches were, for me, very exciting. And the team itself, the Iron Man 3 team, I have to say, are immensely welcoming. They're like, they run this amazing machine, this beautiful film set. They're so well integrated in their performances, particularly Pepper Potts and Tony Stark. Sublime relationship on screen. Deeply romantic and adorable to watch, and you're welcomed by that rhythm. You're welcomed by that team spirit, and it is the team spirit that gets us through very challenging days, actually, and long days. But the team spirit and the love of telling stories, and particularly these stories, gives the crew and the cast enormous energy to battle through those days and end up with. I haven't seen the movie, but I hear it's pretty good. I think what makes the Mandarin such a powerful threat is probably implicit in the script. And when I read it, I loved those lines. And I thought, that's my guy. That's the guy I want to play. You know who I am. You don't know where I am. And you'll never see me coming. And it's that kind of constant movement. I'm here. Here's the enemy. No, you're wrong. It's there. That constant movement is very disconcerting. I think human nature needs to fix the enemy, to see it, and to destroy it. If you don't know where it is, if you never see it coming, then those vicious attacks are deeply disconcerting, especially if you're given a veiled warning. It's on its way. That's very threatening. I'm a great fan of the movies. I loved 1, 2, and Avengers. I love them to bits. And they have that lovely, they have a gloss to them. They have where they are directly related to the original comics. The original comics used a method called 4-color, and you can see the echo of 4-color on the screen. The primal colors. They're beautiful to look at, these movies. They're beautiful, and the relationships within them are real. So all those values embraced in a tremendously exciting action film, but with all these values in it. This is sophisticated entertainment for everybody. It doesn't exclude any member of the audience, but it's high end. It doesn't talk down to anybody. It says, come and ride with us. And when you see people gathering together to watch a Marvel movie, they think, here we are. Okay, I know what this is. I know their style. I love their style. Come on, guys. Style. Love it. What I think I most enjoyed was Collective. It's the group. Of course, led by a great director, great writer, great producer, great leading man, genuinely great leading man. So what you most enjoy is being trusted by that great team to say, do your thing, Ben. So great to be trusted.
The character Maya Hansen is a scientist of genius, arguably on par with that of Tony Stark's, and is a figure in Tony Stark's history, and has some significant bearing on the plot of the present. Yeah, well, you know, it's definitely something approximating intimidating coming into a very well-established franchise with a group of people who know so well what they're getting into and what they're doing by the time number 3 comes along. But I have to say that all of that was dissipated very quickly because everyone involved in it was very warm and welcoming and likes to encourage the newbies, as it were, because, you know, that's part of making more of these films, is you get new people on board. It was really thrilling, actually, walking on set for the first time on this, because there's so much machinery behind it as well. You know, a film set is ultimately a film set because everything reduces down to the simple moment when you're standing in front of a camera and someone says action. So ultimately everything boils down to that moment where you have to, you know, do your job or run for the hills. But there was something particularly thrilling about this set just because of the sheer enormity of the effects and the amount of people on the set and, you know, green screens and all the rest of it. Not to mention the fact that so many of the sets and looks of these movies are already now iconic, and I know from watching the first one in the cinema what Tony Stark's house looks like. So when you're actually confronted with walking onto it, it's quite surreal and exciting. You know, Iron Man is it's a boy heavy movie. I mean, it's called Iron Man, so it's you know, the girl character, but that, you know, that it would be no fun if there were no girl characters at all. So it's and I do think one of the strengths of these films is that the women are written pretty well and unusually. You know, they're not just sort of carriers that run around screaming and shouting. They're kind of, you know, saying "save me, save me." They're not just victims. They tend to be quite smart and sassy and together, which is one of the reasons it appealed to me. And, you know, one of the reasons you get actresses like Gwyneth Paltrow doing it. I was the thing with Robert Downey is that he's, you know, he's every bit as quick-witted and sharp as Tony Stark is. So that comes from him. That's not really a sort of trope of the comic book even necessarily. It's very much him. And there is a sense with him that he encourages you to sort of get on board and jump on his train of you know, being spontaneous and improvising and all the rest of it. And what makes him a great improviser is not the fact that he comes up with sort of zinging lines, but the fact that he feeds lines to his fellow actors and he listens. So if you want to jump in and start playing with him, he allows that. And which I did. And you have to sort of, you know, you have to put up a bit of a fight. Otherwise, you know, the whole thing can go so fast that you're left sort of going, oh, did I get my line out? But but I've got to say, I really enjoyed it. I was thrilled by that, and I love the opportunity to spar with him a bit, and it, you know, it's quite exciting walking that tightrope of feeling like, well, we've gone completely off text and we don't know where we're going, and we're just going to keep going until someone calls cut.
Well, when we come, you know, to Iron Man 3, I think that we're sort of seeing the promise that was happening in Iron Man 2, the Japanese garden sequence where the two of them kind of get back to back and have to go after the bad guys. I think we kind of see that promise realized and fulfilled in Iron Man 3, where they have to come back together to you know, do it one more time. But the relationship is strengthened, and, you know, we now have this public sector superhero with this private sector superhero, and how do these forces come together? Well, Rhodey is, you know, clearly a colonel in the Army, and a colonel in the Air Force, and they have to, you know, he has to follow certain rules that Tony doesn't have to follow, and they need each other, and we kind of see where they plug the hole, so to speak, for each other and what they can do in their jobs. And we find Tony going through a lot of personal battles, and he needs his friend. And it's great to see, I think, these two, especially in the third act, kind of come together and complement each other. Well, I think the relationship with Tony and Rhodey has just gotten stronger, especially in this one. And I like seeing them outside of their suits, you know, having to just go after these people as men and try and figure it out as real guys. And they bust each other's chops through the whole thing, which is, you know, kind of fits in nicely with Shane Black's understanding of that genre, the buddy cop or sort of action genre. And I just feel like we kind of get to see the full complement of who these guys are. Well, in Iron Man 3, we find that War Machine has now been rebranded as Iron Patriot, which is, you know, a lot of good fodder for Tony to poke fun of Rhodey. And I know in the sort of Marvel lore that those are two different characters, and I've seen on Twitter people going, "Hey, what's up? You know, what gives with that?" But you know, we often use sort of a hybrid storytelling practice in these movies, and Marvel is good about sort of tracking that and figuring out where that's all headed. So, you know, we'll see. Hopefully, if Robert wants to come back and we do another one, well, maybe he goes back to War Machine. I don't know. Yeah, having the opportunity to do a lot of the wire work, a lot of the stunt work, a lot of the fighting, it's something that I'm a physical actor. I love to do that. It's something that, you know, before I became an actor, I wanted to be a stuntman, and then I kind of grew a brain and decided to not do that and hurt myself. But it was great to have a minute, you know, to do it in this film. Well, you know, I try to just stay in good shape. You know, on my show, the occupational hazard I have is, you know, having to have my clothes off every 2 or 3 episodes. So I think the vanity is a good motivation for getting to the gym. Well, I think Rhodey, you know, brings sort of the conscience of the franchise to Tony. You know, he's sort of the one who's trying to ground him throughout the entire film, and Tony still seems to sort of untether Rhodey. You know, as much as Rhodey's trying to ground Tony, Tony's trying to untether Rhodey, and I think it's a good tension for these characters, and plays out well, and especially in the third act of the show. I think it was, you know, it's really enjoyable to do these franchises and come back and be able to play with all the toys, you know, and have the opportunity to live out some childhood fantasies and fly around and in a safe way and not really risk your life in doing some of these action sequences. But, you know, made a lot of friendships, and getting to work with Robert again, and having the opportunity to meet Sir Ben and really get to know him as a man has been a lot of fun too.
I think Iron Man 3, audiences in this movie, Iron Man 3, can expect, I think, more of a stew of things that hopefully we shift a bunch. We give, there's a tone that changes from being very suspenseful and dramatic to being very funny, I hope. And I like that we've just sort of tried to juggle the balls a little. This is the street corner version of movie making, where they throw tomatoes at you and you have to keep saying, well, what about this, and what about this? And I like pulling out the stops. I think that I have a very clever co-writer in Drew Pearson. We've given enough elements and story to this that it hopefully stands not just as an episode of Iron Man, like we're a TV series, but actually as a really interesting standalone movie with enough good content to be a worthy successor to Favreau's other films. I hope it is. The idea for the Mandarin was this sort of overarching, sort of global villain that people are sort of aware of but no one can find. That he would be an uber terrorist of indeterminate nationality, but he sort of cloaks himself with these icons of warfare and of warlords. Like he'll have dragons and swords and a throne and things that he knows will intimidate or frighten people, but I imagine he also reads Sun Tzu, and he studies war tactics and takes from different terror regimes. So in his appearance, the beard, there's a little Bin Laden in there, there's a little Castro in there. It's the idea of a cobbled together fright fest of a terrorist that everyone in the world can recognize as malevolent. And he's acquired these sort of acolytes who stream to him because he's a mythic figure that is sort of all things to all people. So it's an interesting version that isn't so much the comic book portrayal. Yeah, it's doing a film like this. There's a feeling sort of jumping on a train that's already been moving. You know, these people have been down this pike before. They've made other Iron Man movies. I had some good advice from Jon Favreau. He was very gracious and wonderful about me coming on board. And with him just as an actor, there was no discomfort. He was a total prince. He tips and advice and friendship. Great guy. The chance to work with Robert again smoothed things over because it felt more like that was familiar. You know, I knew the process and I'd seen his mind work before, so I was prepared for that degree of that speed and calculation which he brings. Other than that, it was pretty much just, I love adventure movies. I bought my first Iron Man comic back in 1966 when I was 4 years old. So it was a challenge to live up to the bar that Favreau had set, which is a pretty high bar in terms of a realistic, grounded superhero movie that felt like it existed in the real world and had people in it that were characters worthy of this kind of acting. You get Academy Award-winning actors in these Marvel movies doing superheroes. It's a remarkable shift from when superhero movies used to be sort of lowbrow. Well, I think we wanted to expand on the notion of Iron Man so that the story wasn't quite so insular or small. I think the Avengers opened it up a lot. But what we wanted to do was go, and with Marvel's blessing, by the way, to their credit, away from the template of the Avengers and do a more sort of story that was grounded in the real world, sort of a geopolitical reality that included the White House and included Air Force One and things like that, and not so much that was about otherworldly things. We wanted, and also when you do a third movie like this, you got to find a story worth telling that feels like it's an inevitable result, the culmination of what's come before. You got to go back to the money, to the main character, and just focus on him, I think, and find out what is there left in his head that's unresolved. What is there about being Iron Man, being a superhero, that's left to explore that feels like a unique way to view that. In this one, we have Tony going through some personal crises, and we have some tone shifts where I think there are parts where it's funny, but parts where he's actually kind of in over his head and kind of panicky. I think the thing that echoes most strongly with me about the movie that I'm most proud of is how much stuff we managed to put in. Just in terms of making an adventure movie that didn't feel like, a small story or an episode, just ideas that let's just stuff one more idea in. Let's put one more joke in, one more clever Drew Pearceism in. It felt like we were just trying to make the most interesting, surprising movie we could, where you didn't stay still for too long with any one idea and just say, that's it, that's enough for this movie. So no, let's keep moving. Let's keep adding stuff. Let's generate as broad a canvas here and do as much of a thriller as we could. So to the extent that this movie actually succeeds, not just as a superhero movie with iron suits, but as a thriller with real characters and real suspense, that's what I'm most proud of. That we can say, there, we did kind of the thriller version, the Tom Clancy / Michael Crichton version of an Iron Man movie. I like that. I think that's a good thing.